special guest who works with Compass Test Prep to present on this session of what is the college admissions testing landscape? What do people need to know? You're going to find out. So thank you for joining tonight's webinar, and I will let you take it from here.
Thank you so much, Laura. Welcome, everyone. If you're in person or you're watching the recording, we really appreciate you attending this because let's face it, it's kind of confusing out there what's going on. So to introduce myself, my name is CD2C. I'm with Compass Education Group. And you might be going, what is Compass? Well, we are a tutoring company and we've been providing top-notch tutoring education for over 25 years. We do both test prep and academic subject tutoring. We do it one-on-one or also even in group classes. And we also do it online all over the world. So yeah, I guess you could say we're kind of experienced. We serve thousands of students every year, and that really, really is our passion. So without further ado, let me give you a map. This is the road ahead, what we will be discussing this evening. So number one, understanding the testing landscape. Oh my gosh, how significant are tests? Why are they used? What is test optional, right? Number two, part two, making the choice between the SAT and the ACT. What are the differences? Number three is create a testing schedule. This is just a suggestion, and you can move it according to your needs, whatever else is in your schedule. And then part four is consider test preparation. Some kind of preparation is better be prepared, right? Than not. And then part five, the final part, is taking the actual tests and then submitting your scores. So I will be walking you through this wonderful process. So I want to assure you that everything that I cover today, let's face it, it's a lot of information and you might zone out. Believe me, my husband did. When I practiced my presentation in front of him, he fell asleep. So I just want you know, if you fall asleep or zone out, it's okay, because this is recorded. As Laura said, you'll be able to watch the recording. And then also this Compass Education College Admission Testing Guide, we come out with it every year, is always up to date. What I encourage you to do is go to here, go to this compassprep.com/guide and download it for free. Better yet, if you call or email Compass, you can get one sent to you free of charge, physical copy, OG, just the hard copy that you can dog ear, underline, highlight to your heart's content. That's what I prefer, honestly. So without further ado, let me give you some of the information I promised you. And to do that, I would like to utilize this hypothetical student, let's call her Sally Student, and walk with her as she goes through the journey of, oh my gosh, what do I do? How do I pick colleges? How do I decide what test to take? So let's take a look at her profile, okay? This is her college wish list. She's a rising junior at a rigorous independent Catholic school in the DC area, hoping to be on the East or West Coast, plans to apply to a range of selective private colleges. Her parents fell in love at Georgetown, so that's kind of her dream school that she's thinking of, and it's at the top of her list. And then she's also looking at other popular Jesuit schools. So that's what you see on her wish list. Her GPA is here, her class rank is here, and some of her notable coursework is here. So what I'd like you to do is put yourself either, you know, if you are a student, put yourself in her shoes, or your parent, think of your student as this kind of candidate. Like, what is the possible wish list? What are the assets that they're bringing to the table? GPA, class rank, coursework, extracurriculars, that kind of thing. What kind of assets do you have to work with to present your student to a college? So let's now jump into the testing landscape. Okay, how important are these college tests anyway, right? Well, there's a lot of discussion in the backdrop of what's going on in academia. So take a look at this particular chart here. Now, what this is describing is the percentage of ACT test takers with an average of A, B, or C from the years 2010 to 2021. And you'll see as the years have gone by, A's have gone up, B's have gone down, and C's have also gone down, but to a slightly lesser extent. So what we're seeing is, wait a second, have human beings just automatically become more intelligent? I don't think so. I think what's going on here is a little bit of what we call grade inflation. Some people also chalk that up to the pandemic and institutions and teachers understanding that students were under a lot of duress, a lot of challenging situations. So maybe more forgiving grading policies. Maybe that's what's happened. But what we do know what's happened is these A's have increased. Now that you see grades on one side of the screen, and then what you see is the composite score distribution of the class of 2022 for the ACT. It is your traditional bell curve, okay? Fewer people, fewer people doing not so well, fewer people doing really, really well, and then everybody in between, which is the typical bell curve. So how the College Board, which comes out with the SATs, and the ACT companies, what they do, they strive to always maintain this kind of yardstick so that colleges, when they see, for example, these kinds of A's, it's like, wait, how do we differentiate one A from another? They look at the test scores. So I am going to whiz through this. There was an article that came out in January of this year. I suggest you look at it if you have the time. The misleading SAT debate, and it's an analysis of testing by the New York Times, and it's very eye-opening. Basically, what they came out with, Opportunity Insights, those are research-based scientists out of Harvard. They have a bunch of findings, and one that I'd really like to point out is that high school GPAs do a poor job of predicting academic success in college. It kind of makes sense when you look at that previous chart that I showed you, because it's like, wait a second, why are the A's, why are there more A's being doled out, right? So that's why test scores, again, are being relied on more heavily. So this chart, what you see here, is also in this article of the New York Times. By the way, if you just search it on Google, it's totally available. I just searched it myself. So what this says is that test scores are strong predictors of college performance. So here's what colleges want to do. They want to make sure that when a student comes to their college, the student is like, oh my God, this is so terrible. I can't handle it. They don't want that experience for students. They want students that can thrive, that are challenged, of course, but that can thrive and feel comfortable in their community. That's what they're looking for. So if you look here, there is a better correlation of scores and grade performance on the y-axis, which is what is vertical. That is your college GPA. If you look at the high school GPAs, not so much. Meaning, let's say you got anywhere from a 3.2 in high school, but interestingly enough, these students got a 3.4 in college. Some of these 4.0s, it's not as strong of a correlation in terms of improvement in high school GPA means improvement in a college GPA. So let's talk about test optional. You've heard that term, right? Test optional officially means that an application is complete with or without a test score, meaning you can apply with a test, you can apply without a test. Okay, that's what it officially means. But colleges, it's just like, it's like dating, okay? You're looking at other people to date. Someone might say, I love you, but do they really? You want to interpret, like, what do you really mean? Same thing with colleges. What does their test optional really mean? Now, the test optional landscape before the pandemic looked like this. So take a look at this. 2/3 of all schools actually required either an SAT or ACT. This is 2019 and before, okay? 1/3 was test optional. Now, you flash forward to today, look at that red pie slice. It's much smaller, correct? However, I needed to let you know that it is increasing literally by the month, even by the week. We're hearing a new school, they've changed their policy, a new school, they've changed their policy. So I'm going to sound like a broken record. What you need to do is look at the schools that you're interested in and check their policy pages on their websites, in the pamphlet, talk to their college admissions people. You want to find out what is their philosophy and what is their languaging. What are they saying? Because you need to know what their philosophy is. You need to know what their test optional means or their I love you means, right? Because everyone means something different. So back to this pie slice, required schools it's at 4.1%. It's actually probably moved up just a little bit because of what's happened in the past 2 months. Now, test optional temporary, these are very important schools to pay attention to. Look, that's about 40. And by the way, these are colleges that Compass has surveyed over 400 top colleges in the United States. So these test optional temporary colleges, you want to be careful because at any moment they may change one way or another. They might go test optional permanent, they could go test free, they could go test required. We don't know, right? That's 40%. An even larger part, almost half of all schools are test optional permanent. Okay. Now there are many different kinds. Test optional, some schools are like, oh, you are not going to be penalized either way. And their languaging is very neutral. Other test optional schools, as you'll see in my future slides, they'll say, we highly encourage your students, if they take the test, to submit their test scores. That's a very different message. So you do need to read between the lines a little bit. Now, the test-free temporary, those are schools that are experimenting with test-free. Test-free permanent, 6.5%. That's the dark blue pie slice. Those are your UCs, your Cal States. And here's something that I want you to know. Test-free is actually a bit of a misnomer. It's really SAT or ACT test-free, but not completely test-free because there are APs. So here's what's happening. A lot of schools that are test-free will actually require students to take APs. And here's the thing about advanced placement tests, okay? They are more expensive at $100, if not more pop. Last I checked, they were $100 a pop. And they're only offered once a year. So they're more challenging to take and study for. So it's something to take note of. So test optional messaging, as I was saying, it can move, right? It can change. So it is definitely evolving. Let's take a look at Dartmouth as an example. Summer of 2020, this is literally what Lee Coffin, the vice president and dean of admissions at Dartmouth, was saying. Optional is not a trick word. There should be no parsing of intent. We do truly mean test optional. That was during the pandemic, right? 3 years later, they are now leaning into encouraging the student to submit scores regardless of how they compare to scores historically, etc. It's almost like saying, please, please, please submit a score. They're not saying you must. They're saying, please. Well, now they're saying you must. As of February 5th, a little over a month ago, Dartmouth has reactivated its testing requirement. And Yale, it's kind of funny, they use the euphemism of test flexible policy, but let me tell you what that means. What you have to do is either submit an ACT or an SAT, international baccalaureate, that's for international students. So I don't believe there's anyone watching that this would pertain to, but the advanced placements are an option. However, what they expect you to do, look at the little fine print at the bottom, you have to include all the results of your AP exams. Now, I know my students that I have tutored, most students don't want to submit all of their scores because they don't necessarily do well on every single AP exam. So this is a little bit challenging. So what we expect our students that apply to Yale or just students in general is that there might be a combination that people do, that students resort to. Brown, as of this month, has also started requiring, and what you're seeing is these institutions, they have done research on the effects of test optional. And what they're saying that academic performance was well correlated with test scores across all subgroups, including students from advantaged and disadvantaged high schools. They found that non-submitters performed similarly to low scorers. By the way, what that means too is these institutions know, oh, so-and-so did not submit a score. They most probably scored very low. And there are possibilities where they might not say it, but some schools might disadvantage, not necessarily make a black mark, but might disadvantage the student for not submitting a score, which is why we suggest to students to submit scores, even if it's not as high as you had hoped for. So the University of Texas, Austin, they did some research on test optional after 4 years of test optional admissions for undergrad applications. So take a look at the non-submitters. The non-submitters, their median score was 1160, and the submitters, meaning these are people who took the test but did not submit a score, right? So submitters, their median score was 1420. And what they found is that amongst those who submitted scores, once they looked at the college GPAs freshman year, how well they're performing in college, they had almost a full point higher GPA, or 0.86 higher point of a higher GPA in the first semester of college. So colleges know that if you don't submit a score, it's almost like a penalty. They know this. They're not dumb. So it's been a misnomer that some students are like, oh my gosh, right, I have to submit a test score. It's like, well, they know that if you didn't submit a test score, that you probably didn't do well on the test or wouldn't do well on the test. So that's something to keep in mind. So finally, another test optional school, Boston College, highly recommends testing. This is what they came out with earlier this month. Again, internal research has shown that test scores, sorry about that, when used alongside other factors such as grades and rigor of curriculum, add value in predicting academic success. So they encourage students to submit their scores. So take a look at this slide. This is the test optional landscape as we speak. We're constantly, updating this. So these are schools that have not yet, publicly extended their test optional policies beyond the 23-24 application cycle. These are schools that have extended their TO policies only to 24-25, and then the ones below, they have extended it to 25-26 and beyond. Again, pay attention to the school's languaging and policy pages of the schools that you're interested in. So let's take a look at Sally's student, okay? The schools that she's interested in. Here's what she's doing when she's researching her schools. She's getting this information. Now, by the way, this is in the college admissions testing guide from Compass, so please look at it. You'll get all of this information. And what is this? Why is this good? Well, especially if you look at the SAT or the ACT, it says 25th to 75th percentile. What that is, that's the middle 50th percentile of scores of students who are accepted to that institution. So let's just take Georgetown University. So last year, what you can look at 1410 to 1540, 25% of students who were accepted to Georgetown last year got lower than a 1410, and 25% got higher than a 1540. So now you can understand what the middle 50th percentile is. And I go like this because it's kind of like goalposts, right? Football goalposts. You want to kick the football of your application in between those goalposts. And then, that tells you, hey, I am a strong candidate. I most likely will be looked at favorably by this college. This doesn't mean that you automatically score and win admission. No, it doesn't mean that. We're just looking at likelihood, right? But here, it is just a guideline. But here's what's interesting. Yale, who is not on here, Yale is now sharing their middle 80th percentile because I think they realize, they don't want to dissuade people like, oh, for example, Georgetown, someone gets a 1400, that's still an awesome score. That student should submit the scores. It's not like, oh, let me hide it. It's something to be ashamed of. Absolutely not. So again, just remember these are guidelines, and you want to consider all of these factors, and especially talk about it with your college admissions counselor. By the way, something I did want to mention too, these ranges for both the SAT and ACT, they are somewhat inflated because of test optional. Because remember, people who take the test are the ones who report their scores, right? We don't know the non-submitters, okay? So that because of test optional, and then also because of super scoring, which I will talk about at the end of the presentation. So again, I said, check out the policy pages and languaging of every school. This is what Sally did with Georgetown, Fordham, etc. You'll see required. You won't be penalized. Encouraged to submit. Everyone has different phrasing. We want to look at that. So I want to suggest to you, some people are thinking to test or not to test. That is the question. Okay. I strongly encourage you to think instead to submit or not to submit. And this is the reason why this happened to my friend's son, but also to some people that I've tutored, where a student may decide at some point, look, this test prep and taking tests is way too stressful. I have so much going on. let me just apply to the UCs and the Cal States. They're all test free, great. Well, what happens, one, if you don't get in to your desired UC or Cal State? There's that. And two, I've seen students fall in love with a liberal arts four-year college that's really cool. They had no idea it existed. It has the specializations that they're interested in. And oh, wow, they strongly suggest taking a test. Oh, and they even offer scholarships if you have a score above a certain number and whatever. But oh my gosh, it's July before my senior year and I have no time to prep now. And I've seen students like go into a tizzy, a panic, because it's like, wait, I could have done some prep at least and been in a better situation. So it's something to consider. So instead of to test or not to test, you want to think to submit or not to submit. So if you get the score you hope for, of course, you're going to submit your score. But even if your score is not above average, now this is from Grinnell College, but it does apply to other test optional schools. If it is not above average for the school that you're looking at, but let's say it's really solid, your high school or your neighborhood, or your background, your score may help you in the admissions process. Also, a high score can offset a low GPA. Really quick, I have a story about myself. In high school, I kind of fell into a not so great crowd, and I skipped school for one day. And what the school decided to do was take every single one of my letter grades and take it down a notch. So if I got a B, if I would have gotten a B, it was a C. If I would have gotten an A, it was a B. And it really shot my GPA, like dead in the water. It was not good. And my SAT score helped bring my application up. Thank goodness. So that's just a case in point. Other things to consider when submit or not to submit. Again, doing your research. Look at the current policy, look at the past policy, because the past policy, many schools are going back to what they used to do because of what the research has been finding. The duration of the current policies, I remember Duke was saying up until a certain point, we will be test optional, etc. What's the submit rate of current applicants, admit rate overall, and the size of the applicant pool? And then if you can take a look at the admit rate of applicants with testing and without testing. We actually have stats on that as well. So let's go to part 2 and look at making the choice, the SAT or the ACT, right? So I have to share this cartoon. I think it's hysterical. These parents are talking. We were originally thinking SAT, but then Noah's admissions advisor told us that left-handed students born on Tuesdays do better on the ACT. Okay, you may hear all sorts of stories or anecdotes about, oh, my friend's daughter, this is what happens. And, I've heard stories like, oh, athletes do better on such and such tests. Girls do better on such and such tests. Okay, don't trust that. Maybe it was true for some people. You need to test it out yourself. I like to say, take a test drive of the tests. I know, bad joke. So, um, to help you, though, make that decision, let's talk about the structure of each test, okay? Let's take a look at the SAT, the digital PSAT or SAT. So when I say SAT, just know that I'm covering both. So the SAT itself is scored on a 1600 point scale, 1520 for the PSAT because it's slightly easier. Both are 2 hours and 14 minutes long. Colleges never see these scores, okay? It is literally a practice SAT. It is stage adaptive now rather than static. Static is paper and it doesn't change according to how you did at the beginning. And I will explain stage adaptive in a minute. And it is evenly split between verbal is always first, and then math comes second. So you can get for both the verbal and math sides, you get between 200 and 800, and they combine the score. So what you have is 4 sections. The first 2 sections are verbal. Everyone gets the first verbal section. Now, by the way, because it's now digital, they can change. Not all tests are exactly the same, but it will be the same difficulty level. That's the first verbal module. So depending on how you do that, you will get led to either verbal 2A or 2B. 10-minute break, then you get the math modules, 35 minutes each. Everyone gets that initial math 1 module, and then you get led to or guided to 2A or 2B. And by the way, a student never knows. It's not like they ring bells and whistles. Oh, you got into 2A or 2B. A student has no clue whatsoever. So it is up to the student to just do their best, not worry about what difficulty level they were led to. So this is how adaptive testing works. Everyone takes that first module, and there will be roughly a division of questions of 5 easy-ish, 5-ish, 10 moderate level, and 5, which is the darkest color. Those are 5 hard questions. So again, these are approximations. If you get approximately less than 2/3 right, you will be led to the easier path. You will be given the easier path for your second module. If you get more than 2/3 correct, you'll get the harder path, module 2B. So if you look at the distribution of the difficulty level of the questions, path A, what we see, and B, they have the same amount of moderate level questions, but path A has easier questions, more easy questions, excuse me, and path B has more difficult questions. And by doing this is again a stage adaptive test, and they use something that's called item response theory. That's what makes it possible for the College Board to make the test shorter, which we know students love shorter tests. I mean, no, not just students. Who doesn't love a shorter test, right? So here's just a quick diagram. If junior year, if a student has done well enough on their PSAT, they may qualify for national merit scholarships. And you'll want to talk with your guidance counselors, college guidance counselors about that. So let's take a closer look at the verbal section, okay? It always starts with reading. Every verbal module starts with reading, and then it comes writing. So look at the difficulty levels. Again, light is easy, medium is moderate, and dark is difficult. It's like a sawtooth pattern, right? Like easy, medium, difficult, and it goes back down to easy. By the way, these white or blank squares, those represent 2 questions that are not scored at all. And here's the thing, you don't know where they are. They could be number 1, it could be number 15, it could be number 27. There are 2 that are not scored. And those are basically experimental questions that the College Board is using to just test out questions for future tests. So what happens is, I have a sensitive computer. Ugh, I'm like, why are you changing? I don't want you to change it. Uh, so, uh, questions will always be presented in this order. First, it's reading, and it goes craft and structure, and these kinds of questions, information ideas, and these kinds of questions. And what you have is that it goes from easy to difficult within each type of question. So this is important for students to remember. Let's say you encounter this really tough question, number three. So really, and it's a word in context, so that's going to be vocabulary based. Uh, a student could be really flummoxed by that question, right? They should take heart and know that right around the corner is an easier question. So it's good to mentally and emotionally prepare oneself. Like, okay, it's almost like a cycle. I don't have to freak out like, oh my gosh, this whole test is going to be impossible. No, it goes from easy, medium, difficult, etc. Um, and writing standard English conventions, that's like grammar and expression of ideas, like order of paragraphs or sentences, rhetorical skills, things of that nature. Let's now take a look at the math. Now, this definitely goes from easy to difficult. And then you'll also see how there are two experimental questions, the blank ones. This is the rough estimated distribution or breakdown of the topic material within the math section. So you have 35% algebra, 35% advanced math. That's really algebra 2. So if you look at this, the SAT has 70% of its math having to do with algebra. And then the latter 30%, or the leftover 30%, is 15% geometry and trig. And then problem solving, data analysis, that's like stats, percentages, probability, ratios, things of that nature. Now, if you look at the ACT, the math actually will be more broad among, not broad, spread out and not as concentrated on algebra as the SAT. So there are some differences. Again, these are things that you want to try out so you see what it feels like to actually do the problems. Speaking of the ACT, let's go to the ACT. It's scored on a basis of 1 to 36 for each section, and then it's the composite score will also be 1 through 36. There are 4 sections for a total of 2 hours and 55 minutes. So I'll have to show you the long passages in reading in English. It's a little bit different and than the SAT. And then also what's different than the SAT is the science section. There is an unscored experimental section at the end. The ACT does it differently. They put all of their experimental questions at the end, not mixed in with everything else. And then you just ignore the optional essay. Literally, no one ever takes that anymore. Take a look at the reading passage on the ACT. They're roughly 600 to 1,000 words per passage. Compare that with the digital SAT. It's a paragraph. Maybe at most it'll be 2 paragraphs. It's a lot shorter, and then you have just 1 question for that. Whereas with on the ACT, you have 10 questions for that. So you can see it's a little bit different. It's almost like this is a marathon, these are sprints, if you want to think of it like that. Also, the science portion, I want to make sure that you understand that taking the science portion in the ACT, it's not like you have to have taken physics, chemistry, biology, astronomy, all of that kind of stuff. Actually, everything that you could possibly need to know will be in the text and also in the graphs. It's almost really like a reading passage, but it just has to do with scientific topics and then has some graphs and charts and diagrams and things of that nature. So it's easier. I like to liken it to or compare it to a puzzle rather than, oh my gosh, it's a science test. So again, back to the SAT or ACT. Let's compare and contrast the actual time that you spend on these questions. So if you look at this with the SAT, time per question is 95 seconds. ACT is 60 seconds. That's 35 less seconds per question. And then if you look at the verbal section, the SAT is 70 seconds, and the ACT, which we put the science section in there because, as I mentioned, it's like a reading section. The ACT, you get, again, 30 less seconds, 40 seconds per question. So if you think about it, the ACT is more of a speeded test. That's what they call it, meaning that you're required to think maybe a little bit more quickly and answer questions more quickly. I have heard, now this is not an official thing, but I've heard some students say that they actually feel that while the ACT you have to work more quickly, the SAT has more tricks. Again, that's not everybody. I've just heard some students, that's how they feel about it. But again, you need to try it yourself. Take that test drive that I mentioned. So how are you going to select which one to take? By the way, you don't want to take official tests of both. First, that's a lot of money. Second, it's a lot of time. Don't want to do that. And you'd be wasting time and money. And it's the equivalent of having a limited amount of time, money, and resources, and you're trying to build two houses at the exact same time. You won't do very well. You should just consolidate and work on just one test. So what I'd like you to do is, once you've taken, let's say you've taken the PSAT and a practice ACT question, ACT test. By the way, I did want to mention that if you share your information with Compass, give us a call or email us. I will also mention this at the end. Mention that you have seen this presentation, and we will set you up. Compass will set you up with free practice tests, so you don't have to worry about that portion at all. What I'm now going to do is show you a concordance tool that is available on, hold on, here we go, available on the website of Compass, compassprep.com/concordance and conversion SAT ACT. So take a look at this. Oops, gotta refresh this. There we go. So refresh and go back. Excellent. So disregard the cute cartoon. Let's say you've taken the ACT, okay, and you got a 26, okay. You toggle this little button down here. See, you just toggle it to 26, and it tells you what the equivalent score is on an SAT, a 1240. So that's if you've taken one, or the PSAT. Let's say the PSAT, you got an 1100. That's the equivalent of a 22 on the ACT, okay? Another thing, keep on scrolling because there are a lot of resources just on this one site or one page. You can compare your scores. Let's say you got a 1300 on the SAT and you got a 32, let's say, on the ACT. So notice how where that little needle is, it's strongly in the ACT. What that means is, for whatever reason, you or your student really jive with the ACT more. So yes, that is what you should take. So this is a very, very useful tool. So you can figure out, okay, where should I allocate my resources, right? I am now going back to our regularly scheduled programming. If I can just find it. Yes, there we go. Okay. So you take the tests, look at the concordance tools, and Sally did that, and she realized, oh, okay, let's now go to taking the SAT. So let's create a good testing schedule. Here's a good example of one. So she's working with Compass. She's on the East Coast. Kelly is our director over there in DC. And Kelly suggests to her, okay, let's, the summer after your sophomore year, understand test policies, do some research. September of junior year, take the diagnostic tests and analyze which one is better for me. So create a preparation plan, winter break-ish of the junior year. And she's decided that she wants to take her first sit-down official test of the SAT in spring of 11th grade, let's say April. So what you want to do is, let's say she wants to take it in April, around December. is a good time to start prepping. I know it's the winter break, Christmas, all that kind of stuff. I know students groan all the time, but it's a good time to start if you want to take the test in April. You could buy a book from Amazon, Barnes and Noble, what have you. There's Khan Academy for the SAT online. You can do one-on-one or group classes with a company like Compass, lots of other companies out there. But this is what we found, the golden ratio is a nice pace for prep. You take, let's say, one lesson a week, and it will alternate between verbal and math / science if it's ACT. And then one practice test a month, January, February, and March, all prepping you for April, the April testing. So again, I mentioned you could do one-on-one types of things, which can be online or in person, small group classes, online or in person. And what you also want to do then is figure out what is your test goal, right? Sally is interested in all of these, is interested in all of these colleges, and she figures that, okay, she got a 1080 on her PSAT, 1220, her first practice SAT score, 1450, a little bit of a reach, but that's going to be her goal, right? And that falls in the middle of each of these scores of the schools, the middle 50th percentile. So she's going to submit her test scores there. I'm just showing you a slide of some scholarships that look at test scores. Now here we're just, because she took the SAT, that's why I have SAT scores there, but scholarship that look at test scores will also look at the ACT. So 1240 and above, 1300 and above. This Johnson scholarship at Santa Clara can be full tuition, which is amazing. I like to mention that I personally, when I was in college, I submitted and applied to a distinguished young woman scholarship program, and a fifth of my application was test scores. And I actually was able to fund 2/3 of my college education at Northwestern University with this scholarship. So test scores are a good thing, especially if you want financial aid and scholarships. Oh, sorry, I was saying that, but if you want more information on that, if you go to compassprep.com/test scores and scholarships, it has more details and everything like that. So finally, consider test preparation. And what does that entail, right? There are 4 pillars. Content knowledge, like grammar rules and math formulas, command strategies, like how can you reverse engineer a question so as to, and look at keywords. And I will show you some things that I love to share, like tidbits that will help you when you actually take the test. Time management, you want to make sure that you don't run out of time. And you don't want to just complete the test on time. You always want to have at least a little bit of window to do review. And then finally, emotional control. Like if you're bored, learning to refocus your attention, your energy. So here's an example how test prep works. So here's something that needs emotional control, content knowledge, and command of strategies. Okay, so take a look at this problem. I hope it doesn't create some distress among some adults who thought, oh, I thought I had left those SAT problems behind. Yeah, they're crazy. Angela is making a quilt using only solid blue fabric and floral fabric. For every 2 square yards of blue, she needs 4 square yards of floral. If she uses 6 square yards of blue, how many total square yards of fabric will she use for the quilt? Okay, so typically you do the math, right? You think 2 blue to 4 floral. So 6 blue to X floral. We set up that ratio, right? So X equals 12, right? But guess what? That's a trap, because look at what they're asking. They're not asking for how many floral square yards, right? They're looking for total square yards. So let me impart on you. Always figure out, what are they asking for? Okay, that's how they trick you. I feel like they have a lawyer working for them or something. You know what I mean? I'm like, Urgh. So yes, they ask you for total square yards of fabric, not floral. So the answer is not 12. You have to add 6 plus 12 is 18. That's the answer. So those are like, that's an example of what you want to make sure to pinpoint when you do test prep, those kinds of strategies, making sure to know what to look for, right? What are the tricks that they like to slip in there? Another thing, this is from the ACT, how test prep works. You want to think of emotional control and time management. The ACT English section, it is 45 minutes long for 75 questions, okay? So this is a heat map of the difficulty of questions. Green is easy, red is hard, yellow is in between. And so what this tells you is a student needs to be steady, okay? Steady and keep on going. Even if they get discouraged by some of these red questions, wait, right around the corner are some yellow and green questions, right? So making sure to keep steady, persistent, don't get discouraged. And you want to use all 45 minutes and make sure approximately 15 minutes for each third, right? Approximately, maybe a little bit less so you have time to review, as I had mentioned before. That's the ACT English. Let's take a look at the ACT Math. So you have an hour to do 60 questions. Using emotional control and time management, you'd think 1 minute per question, right? Wrong. Let's say you are a high scoring student. I don't want you spending a minute per question on the easy ones. These should take you just a short amount of time. Let's say instead of 20 minutes on 20 questions, let's say you take 12, 15 minutes on this portion, right? Maybe you'll take 20 minutes on the middle, moderate level. But in the third, what you want to do, you've banked some time now from this earlier section. You want to spend 25, 27 minutes on the more difficult questions. On the other hand, let's say you absolutely despise math. It is not your friend and you don't do well at math, no problem. My husband is in that camp. So what I would suggest to him and you to do is for this, you have 60 minutes to do the 60 questions of math, right? For 59 minutes, you only concentrate on these first 2/3, the first 40 questions, because you will excel more. You will do better at what you typically excel at, right? These difficult ones, these are stumpers. These can take several minutes per question, right? So what you'll do is in that final minute, the 59 minutes were for the first 2/3. That final minute, you just pick your favorite letter. Like me, C starts Shooty, my name. So I would just pick C and answer C for the last final 20 questions. And I promise you, you will do better just doing that one strategy. So that's what test prep helps with. Oh my goodness, how did that happen? Okay, whoa, there we go. So finally, taking the official tests and submitting scores. So take a look at what Sally did. She was interested in the 1450. That was what she was aiming for. And then her practice tests each month, approximately. November was what she started with, 1220. She went down a little bit and then increased 1320, 1380. She takes it the first time and she gets a 1400. Pretty darn good. It's a 750 math and 650 verbal, right? So she talks with her director and thinks, you know what, let's try taking it again. Maybe I can get that 1450, right? But Sally's thinking she probably can't increase her math score. She just wants to work on the verbal. No problem. She just works on the verbal with her tutor, takes it again, and then gets her composite score of the official test is actually lower, but her verbal score has increased. See how that works? So she got a 1400 here. She got a 1390 here. So with super scoring, she gets a 1440 because you get the higher score in math and the higher score in verbal. And University of Virginia admissions, it's their policy in super scoring. It shows that they super score and encourage it, and we'll do it for you. Just know the majority of colleges do super score, but you need to do your research and find out which ones do that. So happy ending. Sally's student got pretty close to her goal, her test score goal, submits her scores and applications, and ends up going to Boston College. Yay! So I hope your how shall I say this, your journey through the college admissions seeking and landscape will be as fruitful and hopefully maybe somewhat fun. So I do want to just mention how we at Compass can help. Feel free to call us or email us for consultations. No question is dumb. Do know that. And please contact us because we will provide free practice tests. You just need to talk with one of our representatives. We have one-on-one and group test prep. And then if you're interested, we also have AP test prep. I don't do that. I only do test prep, SAT and ACT, but there's AP and then also academic tutoring. So really, I invite you to call or email our office with any questions or comments and whatnot. Please know that Compass's mission is literally to help as many students as we can. And also remember to keep a positive attitude on this test prep journey. It's just one of the stones or one of the bricks in the home that you are building that will be your college part of your college journey. So what I like to end with is there's a quote from Zig Ziglar. Some people here might know he was an author and motivational speaker, and he said that if you are not willing to learn, no one can help you. But if you are determined to learn, no one can stop you. And we at Compass are determined to make you absolutely unstoppable. So thank you so much. Now we'd like to open up for any questions that you all might have. So please feel free to ask away. There may have been some things that you feel need clarification. Yes, please let me know. Let us know.
Shruti, thank you so much. That was so informative on a deeply confusing topic. So there is one question, and then as mentioned, please drop any other questions. We have about 7 more minutes in this session. Could you just re-go over the point you made about if a score is below the average, like what's the advice there about submitting or not submitting to a particular school?
Yes. So, in fact, I was going to bring up the slide. Not sure that I need to, but I'll bring up this slide just so people can see it. Because what I really like to point out, like I'm just going to take Loyola Marymount University that I'm pointing to here. All too often, what we have seen and colleges have seen, which is, because of the test optional policy, many students have been disadvantaged by thinking, oh, wait, I'm interested in Loyola and I only got an 1150, okay, only, right? But the thing is, you have to look at the rest of the parts of your application, which may or may not be strong. You want to weigh that because that's also very important. But please note that 25% of students accepted to Loyola Marymount last year got a score of less than 1280. So it would be a mistake not to submit your score. Okay, if you are in the bottom 5%, that, yes, probably does not look good, okay? But what's happened and what a lot of colleges have seen, unfortunately, which is why so many of them have gone back to, let's just require it again, is that students have literally put themselves at a disadvantage by submitting a score that they didn't think was great, okay? But instead they withheld the score. And if you think about it this way, when a college is looking at a candidate, they want as much information as possible. So having that full, they're not going to assume, oh, they probably did really well and didn't submit the score. They're not assuming that. They're actually going to assume that you did very poorly. And that assumption can hurt those who didn't do poorly, but just did okay, if that makes any sense. So again, this is something you really, really want to discuss with your college guidance counselors. It's a lot of splitting hairs, and a lot of research is necessary to see how do schools really, really look at